great to see such a good crowd, see old friends, new friends. I'm Scott Goins. I'm the director of the Honors College, and we participated in this with the MFA program, and we're glad to take part, and then also teach in the English department, as a lot of you know. Wanted to thank several people before we introduce our readers. First of all, Mike Horner for organizing so much of this and doing the filming right now. So, I wanted to say that I really feel our MFA program is displaying a lot of energy now. I just get really good vibes with it, and I appreciate the students here who have found something at McNeese and are enjoying it, and want to thank all the, I won't mention all the faculty involved, but we have a really great team, a lot of people working together. Also wanted to thank the McNeese Foundation for helping out with this. Laura and Buddy Leach several years ago donated to Sound the Honors College, and they've given us lots of money for speakers and pizza and important things like that. So we appreciate them. I was thinking today what a blessing we have in Louisiana to have such great creative writing. There's so many wonderful names. We have such a rich tradition. I was really excited that David Middleton could come and be the reader for the Leo Marcello reading that we have every year. David knew Leo. When I posted this on Facebook, 4 or 5 people said, "Oh, Leo was such a wonderful guy. He was a great teacher," or some said he was a great poet. I don't know anybody who didn't like Leo. He was just inspirational on a lot of different levels. And you guys went to graduate school together, right? Right. So it was just a very happy event. To be able to do this. Just a couple of logistics, and then I'll introduce our reader finally. We have some books here for sale. The bookstore could not come, and so I gave a few books away to some of our students, but we also have some for sale here. And we'll have a reception, of course, afterwards. So hope everybody who would like to stay will stay. We've got sandwiches and dessert and wine and all that. So, okay, let me give my introduction here. All right. Okay, so until his retirement in June of 2010, David Middleton served as professor of English, poet in residence, distinguished service professor, and Alcee Fortier, distinguished professor and head of the Department of Languages and Literature at Nicholls State University in Thibodaux, Louisiana. In August of 2014, he was named the first poet in residence emeritus at Nicholls. Okay. Middleton has many books. They include The Burning Fields. Most of these are with LSU Press, Burning Fields, LSU Press. As Far as Life Remains, Cummington Press. Beyond the Chandeleurs, LSU Press. Habitual, Peacefulness of Gruchy. I should have asked, is that how we pronounce him? Good enough. Poems after pictures of Jean-François Millet. The Fiddler of Driskill Hill poems. This one that we have for sale outside the gates of Eton, and Professor Middleton has a collection of his poems coming out from Texas. What is it? Texas Review Press. might get some of those for those of you who would like to have a copy of that, so you can let me know. Dave, we're very thrilled to have you here. Thank you so much for coming, and take it away.
All right. Thank you. I knew Leo Marcello very well. Can everyone hear me? I'm kind of tall, so I have to bend over a little bit. And also, another retired faculty member and extremely fine poet who will be visiting tomorrow here in Lake Charles, Stella Nasanovich. So I feel a very close connection to McNeese. I'm going to read for about 45 minutes, and when I get down to 15 minutes of that left, I'm going to get a signal, and wherever I am in my proposed list of poems to read, I'm going to move immediately to the last three, because they are in dedication, one to Leo, one to Stella, and one to another poet associated with me, Leo and Stella. So I am plot conscious. The first poem I'll read is called Woman Mending, after the drawing by the 19th century French artist Jean-François Millet. After writing poems about Louisiana, North Louisiana where I was born, and South Louisiana where I've lived for many years, for 20 years I was drained of Louisiana subject matter, so I said, why not write a poem about a picture? Poets do this all the time. In the Iliad, book 18, Homer gives us a description of Achilles' shield. John Keats, his poem, Ode of a Grecian Urn, describes an urn that he either saw in the British Museum or made it up, we don't know for sure. And W.H. Auden, the modern English poet, wrote a modern version of Homer, his poem called The Shield of Achilles, about post-World War II Europe. So this is a poem about a French peasant in the 19th century, pre-industrial France. Millet grew up in such a world. And all she's doing is mending clothes. I say all she's doing, but how much that is. Life is made up of things unraveling, wearing out, having to be mended, put back together. So this very simple act of this peasant woman, in a way, speaks to the human condition. So this is a short poem of about 16 lines. So you can listen to me or look at the picture or both. Woman mending. So inward and so near to us the scene, we fear we are intruding just to look at one intent, yet patient and serene, giving herself to work that must be done. Her practiced fingers bent, adroitly poised to use a pitted thimble, needle tip, pull tight the thread that stitches closed a hole in a woolen shirt rumpled in her lap. A shelf holds piled up clothes still unrepaired in the dim, bare room. Scissors hang in reach from her chair's left stile, ribbon looped through rings, blades hidden by her sewing basket's weave. Such mending never seems to have an end. The ready fingers, things unraveling, yet passing through a window just unseen. Light rests like grace and fate on thread and hand. Millet liked to paint pictures showing that these peasants had a kind of epic dignity, as if they were equal to characters in Homer or Virgil, whom he knew very well. So that's the start. The next one, if you, the person handling this would move to slide number 2, is called Clockwise. The speaker of this poem is an old man. His wife, named Mary, has died. His children have grown and gone. And we see him lying in bed at night, thinking of his past life. I'm getting to a stage in my life where I'm doing that more and more. And he thinks about all the hours, daytime and nighttime hours over all the years with his wife, with his children, and things they've done just around the house, and how much those things mean. Some of us are familiar with the canonical hours of the church, like Vespers or Matins and so on. And everybody's personal life also has personal hours in which we do things over and over again that have a meaning in and of themselves. I got the idea of this poem from a 19th century book called The Wonder, as in W-O, Wonder, The Wonder Clock. It's a book of fairy tales for children, written by a man named Howard Pyle. His wife, Catherine, wrote a little poem for each of the 24 hours of the day, talking about life in an English country cottage in the 19th century. You get up, you make breakfast, you start the fire, you see the children off to school, and so on. And a 20th century literary critic wrote the following about the Wonder Clock. So I'll read this and then read the poem. He said, "The Wonder Clock involves the cyclical, recurring experience of the old familiar things day in and day out. From the preparation of breakfast to the tucking of children in bed, a repetition of daily activities that never results in boredom, jadedness, or world weariness. These old things that intoxicate and nourish are the permanent, lasting sources of joy and wonder that inhere in work and play, which honor nature's laws and God's design. There is the poetry of the home in the Wonder Clock that elevates humble work and domestic life, transforming the honest toil and simple, innocent pleasures of the home into glimpses of heavenly peace and reminders of Eden." So why is there a clock face up there? Because I'm going to talk about a wall clock that has a moon face in the poem. So this poem is called Clockwise, after verse about the hours of the day by Catherine Pyle in Howard Pyle's children's storybook, The Wonder Clock, 1887. The old man is speaking. "And now at last I lay me down to sleep, an old man in the winter of his years, so cold at twilight, taking to his bed, well tended by what memory sees and hears. Upon a hook within the family room, a wall clock marks the hours with its chimes that comfort me, a widower alone, drawn late to other hours and other times. My wife long gone to ashes, dust and bone, our children grown and scattered, I retired to dwell inside some mellow pensiveness that took deep hold as my past life expired. And thus I lie in dark beneath a quilt, my Mary sewed from patches, odds and ends, that match a chronicle of days and ways my clockwise mind recalls, then sifts and blends. This stiffened shoulder, where each crying child would sleep to Mary's baby song I'd sing, a song she made so simple, sweet, and mild, it was itself the comfort it would bring. The box of recipes, a wedding gift, handwritten cards in script of friend and kin, long done with needing larder, stove, or board, ink fading toward the state their souls are in. But most a chest of letters, photographs, that Mary culled and stored before her death, in scents of pomander and potpourri, keepsakes all laced with ribbons in her breath. Such clockwise thoughts possess me as the hands move round a face, a smiling, sleepy moon, its catalogue of hours, my book of time, more storied nearer midnight than at noon. And so I know that right here all along, our common life was not a common thing, but worthy to be praised, like Mary's song, that only I in silence now can sing. So like the first poem, it tells us that commonplace, everyday life is worthy of being written about. The next poem, Test Pattern. Any of y'all old enough to remember this? I won't ask a show of hands. When I grew up in the 50s and 60s, when TV wasn't on, and it wasn't on 24/7 back then, you'd get the test pattern with the Indian chief. So when I'd get up on Saturday morning to watch cartoons and Captain Kangaroo or Howdy Doody Show, you'd get this for a while. And I think it also came on the last thing at night. I can remember when TV went off at night, there used to be a prayer, can you imagine? The national anthem, and there'd be a sign off. But this test pattern, I guess, somehow showed the people doing the TV thing how to make sure that everything was clear and proper. Well, TV in the 1950s was one thing. TV today is something else. As far as what you see, what's considered permissible, even during hours that used to be considered for general audiences. So I decided to look into the history of this image, this test pattern, which originally was a kind of card done in pen and ink that could somehow be projected up to all the TV screens. In 2009, when analog TV went off the air nationwide for the last time, so antennas and rabbit ears wouldn't work anymore, as a salute to early TV, all the TV stations in America put the Indian head test pattern up one last time. The poem refers to a lot of TV shows and characters that I knew growing up. Some of you will remember these, but some of them may be new to some of the younger ones of you, but I'm not going to try to explain all that. It's basically a way of asking questions about how TV used to be, how it is today. The Indian head had a kind of afterlife. In the early 20th century, it was produced as a cover for night lights that would be put in children's rooms to give them a sense of comfort in the dark hours of the night. So this one's called Test Pattern, and you can look at that as I read if you'd like. It filled the screen from midnight until dawn. After the Late Show, anthem, station sign, in those brief early days of innocence, when television broadcast black and white. The pattern was rectangular, abstract, made up of wheels and numbers, blocks and lines, to measure shape, proportion, light and dark. Its soundtrack shrill, the sine waves monotone. But centered at the top as pure decor, a chief in profile stared beyond the set, in eagle-feathered headdress, beaded shirt, with cheekbones high and eyes and lips severe. Penciled in 38 for RCA, the chief looks dignified and much concerned, a guardian spirit troubled by his charge. Fair meadowlands, so near where badlands. For by the time his image was replaced with blank, plain color bars, the episodes of which he seemed the genius were no more, or ran in syndications few would see. Leave It to Beaver, the Andy Griffith Show, where fathers talked with sons of right and wrong, or Gunsmoke, where Matt shot an outlaw down and said to Chester, he was just no good. And now when desperate housewives push aside June Cleaver, Harriet Nelson, and Aunt Bee, even primetime viewing is PG. We long for Adam, Hoss, and Little Joe. Today, test patterns have no further use for stations that stay on throughout the night with infomercials, soft porn, cable news, no national anthem, sign off, sleep in peace. And what of the chief? His card was thrown away in a dumpster when wrecking balls knocked down the RCAO's old factory, then was saved, retrieved by one of the demolition crew. And for a while he stayed, a nightlight shade, glowing toward dawn when children safely woke on cartoon Saturdays, as did their folks, who saw his pattern flicker on the screen. So I guess you can make a point out of just about anything. If we could go now to number 6, calling down the birds. Number 6, calling down the birds. There she is. This is Caroline Dorman. Some of you may be familiar with Miss Dorman. Her dates are 1888 to 1971. She lived in a cabin on a small estate in Bienville Parish called Briarwood. It's on the National Place of Historic Registers. She wrote books on Louisiana flowers, birds, in life, drew sketches and watercolors of birds and flowers, and was internationally known. Franklin Delano Roosevelt put her on a commission, the first woman ever so appointed, to try to discover Hernando de Soto's travel route through the South in the 16th century. She had gardens at Briarwood where she tried to preserve Louisiana wildflowers that were threatened by development, and she would grow them and have bulbs that she would send to people around the state, around the country who wanted them. One of her customers was Thomas Edison. A letter from Edison survived, so he invented the light bulb, but he wanted her bulbs, her flower bulbs, to plant up in the northeast. Well, she lived near a tiny town in Bienville Parish called Saline, where my maternal grandparents lived. And I would visit them in the summer, and I got to know Miss Dorman. To me, she was just a strange old woman who lived in the woods. I didn't know she was internationally famous. You know how it is when you grow up around famous people, and later you find out how famous they are. And she lived long enough to see some of my very earliest poems, which weren't very good. But she was kind about it and encouraged me. And one time she let me spend the whole day with her. She was unmarried. She had a sister she lived with for a while. And so I followed her around. I watched her work in her garden. And she let me see her do something that only a few people ever got to see. And the poem is going to reveal what that is. There are some references to her as if she's a kind of Noah, not of animals, but of Louisiana flowers and birds, trying to preserve them. I don't know if you can flip to the next slide. There's a second slide for this same poem. Is that one available too? It shows, no, it would be one before that. That's okay. No, come back down to her. That'll do. That's perfectly fine. So this one is called Calling Down the Birds. And the title will become clear as we get to the end of the poem. I grew up in Shreveport, and that's mentioned. So this is addressed to Miss Norman. You saw them just the way they really were. Those flowers in your gardens in the wild. Studied, preserved in earth and paint and words, the naturalist and artist of one mind. The red woodbine and orange yellow phlox, greenbrier, blue larkspur, nodding indigo, the violet oxalis, rainbow names, a covenant in pastoral catalog. You knew the birds as well. Goldfinch, wren, the swallow, warbler, sparrow, and the food they love to eat, calling them from the trees to peck up at your feet the sprinkled seed. And you would stay at Briarwood, birthplace, home, secluded in a woad's uplifted hills. your cabin grounds, a modest green estate, by wisdom and solicitude maintained. And there some April dawns, a pineland quiet, would draw you on toward spots in partial shade, good for celestials. It's a flower. Good for celestials. Common once, now rare, in North Louisiana's well-drained clays. Their sky blue petals graceful on the stem, they open in mid-morning, shrivel at noon, then die before their first and only day darkens toward far-off clusters of the stars. And you remembered how their meadowlands once flowered around old Shreveport to its edge, now ringed with plants and neighborhood escapes, lying like slabs above the dusty bowls. I came from Shreveport often as a boy to visit kin close by you in Saline, and I would ask to share your solitude by following and watching for a day. You taught me birds you named by sight and song, and let me smell new cuttings taking root, species at threat that you would propagate, their wildness spared and thriving in your care. And once when I brought down those early poems you read and complimented, being kind, sensing how I was trying to say my way back home to that same place you never left, you had me stand apart, yet almost near, then call the autumn birds from bough and sky to come to earth and eat celestial seeds, this time from open hands you lifted up toward feathers, cloudy black and iris bright, a kingdom needing peace, a saving grace, a mixed flock growing larger by your love, still trusting that first promise you had made. In other words, she could hold her hands out with seeds and birds of different species. You know, usually you get all blackbirds, all cardinals. They trusted her. It was all like she was healing the breach between what the Bible calls the fall of man and an Edenic existence when everything lived in harmony with itself. And it was remarkable to see that, but I couldn't be right next to her. The birds wouldn't come down, so I had to be far enough away they'd come down, but not so far away I couldn't see it. So that's my poem in honor of her. The next one, 7 porches. There you go. That's my grandparents' house in Saline. What is a porch, and why does it matter to know that? Here's a definition of a porch, like a front porch. A porch often symbolizes a transitional space between the private sphere of home and the public world outside, representing a place for reflection, community interaction, and a sense of welcome, where one can observe the world without fully entering it. Like many people have done, and perhaps you've done this too, have you ever gone back to a town where you had relatives you knew as a child? They're dead now, the house has been sold, so you can't walk onto the property, you'd be trespassing. Maybe people would change the way the house looks. But something in you draws you back. You want to see that place and remember when you were a child what happened there. Well, not far from where Miss Dorman lived, this little town of Saline, I would go back and just park my car on the road across from my grandparents' house and remember sitting on that front porch. You can hardly see it, one of the big porch. And remember when the grown-ups would sit out there, this is pre-air conditioning, in the evening while the house was cooling from the heat of cooking in the kitchen, and they would talk about what they knew so well back in those days, the birds, the animals, the weather, and the country. And all that came flooding back. And I remembered it as a time in which I was really in touch with something so primary and so important, kind of like the hours in the poem Clockwise, except that was more domestic inside a cottage. This is more outside the world of North Louisiana. And having gone back there and thought about these things, which I'll enumerate in the poem, as I drove away from the house, that's a hilly part of Louisiana, you know, in the Enville Parish, there are tall pine trees up and down either side of the road. It was almost like driving through columns of the temple. And what the afternoon sun did to those column-like pines, the poem will say at the end. So this one is called Porches, and then I'll shift to a rather different subject after that. Porches, village of Saline, the Enville Parish, North Louisiana, at my late maternal grandparents' house. I'm going back as a runner. They're gone. The sand and gravel road, smooth asphalt now, passes beside the church and sunken stones, of kin both dead and living yet a while, in memories of one who left and stayed. I slow down for those fields, recalled and seen, cultivated, fallow, undisturbed. Shift my old standard into neutral gear, then quietly glide towards stillness in the drive. Others have owned this house for 60 years, and though my home is here in every sense, possessing and possessed, I cannot step at will upon a transferred property. So rolling down the window, I look out, binding in mind what's gone with what remains, then walk up to a gatepost where I wait for shades to gather thin in autumn air. And there, in seasons blending without end, the bloom and fruit, oxalis and pecan, on that deep porch between the hall and yard, I see myself and listen, man and child, to voices long conversant with the world, made up of things that have their place in waves, in calendar, in catalog, and rhyme, the holy days of ordinary time. Spring's golden cordalis, white-top sedge, the yellow evening primrose, yellow warts, St. Peter's and St. John's, in summer dusk, wisteria in thickets by the streams, the sprawling moss verbena, purple rose, by early August done, October's frost and chain leaf asters, winter possum haw, and dandelion puffballs at winter's end. And where these thrive and die without a sound, pine warblers nest unseen in tallest pines, their high-pitched trill forever coming down, while from the last few open longleaf groves, now passing with the passing hillside farms, lark sparrows sing in elegy and leave stump fields of their unsettled breeding place, searching in other woods for native ground. Such things I take to heart and keep in mind, beholding and beholden in their gift, each one a porch, a station, and a wedding, the inward and the outward reconciled, the fathomed patterns matching, world and word, like mockingbirds whose mimicking in spring sweetens into a single autumn song, by Choctaws called the bird of many tongues. And so I leave a gatepost in the drive, in treetop light from afternoon's low sun, that blinds me in the rear view mirror's glass, the future now reflected in the past, along this sandhill road where crest to crest pines rise sky high, colonnades of fire. So go back to your grandmama's house, you may get a point. I'll do one more and then I'll ask where we are, how much time?
You're at 30 minutes.
So I'm down to 15 already? Okay, well that's okay. I'm not gonna go long. So what I'm going to do, if we could move forward please to number 16, the break in. Number 16, the break in. Just keep going. Because that is already another thought. There it is. Good. My last 3 poems are about 3 people associated with Leo, Marcello, Stella Misanovich, and myself. This is John Martin Finley, who lived from 1941 to 1991. He earned his PhD at LSU when Leo and Stella and I did, and we were all good friends and all poets. Leo died young at 59. John died at 50. He contracted AIDS. I'm not sure how. I didn't know anything about his private life. But in those days, early 1980s, there was almost nothing that could be done. It was a death sentence. Plus, people were terrified to be around you. So he knew he had only a few years to live. But he was determined to write a book of essays and a book of poems. And for 10 years on his family farm in Alabama, with death hanging over him as a definite thing, he did that. But he died before he could get them published. And so in the last year of his life, I was still in Louisiana. I called him up. He couldn't even hold the phone by then. His mother had to hold it to his ear. I said, would you like me to be your literary executive? See your works in the print? He said, please, yes. So I've spent 35 years doing that. And I won't belabor the point, but if you look his name up on the internet, John Martin and Finley spelled F-I-N-L-A-Y. There are a lot of ways to spell Finley, so you gotta get it right if you're gonna Google it, F-I-N-L-A-Y. The first book on his life, essays, and poems has just been published, not by me, by somebody else. So from despair and death, his heroic work of 10 years to keep going, and my willingness to help as best I could has paid off. He's now nationally known. Well, this is a poem that goes back to our time at LSU. Why is it called The Break-In? The poem will explain what that means. John led a very Spartan life. When he went to his apartment, there were cigarettes, coffee, and that's it. And one time when he and some of the rest of us were out eating and having a few glasses of wine and talking about poetry, some thieves decided they'd break into his apartment. They didn't know who he was, just here's an apartment, let's go for it. And this tells the story of that. There are references to lots of names here, writers he wrote about, characters in his poems. I'm not going to belabor all that. And some constellations that he used to show his sisters in the sky. He knew all that very well. But just get a general impression of the life he lived and what happened when these thieves broke in, hoping to find a lot of stuff in his apartment. So this takes place at LSU in Baton Rouge when Stella, Leo, and I and John were there. This one, and then one for Leo and one for Stella, and that'll be it. Some 40 years ago, yet in my mind, from time to time, I see those rooms again. That spare, unshared apartment where you lived, earning the PhD at LSU, a bed half made, a nightstand with its lamp, ashtray and cigarettes, and on the floor a stack of books you read, then underscored, engaging every text, intently fixed, your very being seemingly at stake. Caragos, intense dialogue with kings, from Holy Writ and Plato's Socrates, to Thomas, Dante, and the troubled reigns of Nietzsche, Freud, Tate, Kafka, Winters, James, all actors in the drama of a soul you strove to save from tragic turn and fall. Your place had little more, a single pan to heat up coffee water on the stove, a black typewriter with its sticky keys, long yellow pads for drafts of verse and prose, scenes from your struggles with the Gnostic gods, then foreign to an Alabama farm, whose seasons of the church and earth were one. And there you dwell within the things that tell, spring dogwoods, Easter lilies, hyacinths, late summer's morning glories, white and blue, the fall's frost aster pebbles on the ground, and Christmas holly weaving winter peace, or mantle yard, grave, chancel, garden door, or pastures you would cross to reach a slope, with sisters watching as you called and traced between the primum mobile and pond, the northern constellations name by name, the hunter and the dragon and the lyre, Job's coffin held aloft by darkened stars. Sometimes that realm could seem so far away, and yet so near in hottest Baton Rouge. When you walked back one night to quiet rooms from wine and conversation, new work shared through dinner with like-minded poet friends, to find a door ajar, a window prized by thieves who'd broken in, but then found nothing worth stealing. Old clothes, older books, a manual Underwood, fair copies typed, ashes of finished cigarettes and thoughts, no TV, radio, hi-fi, or cash, and so fled empty-handed, cursing God. And when you saw that all you had was there, the cinder block bookshelves, unpainted boards, still holding Shakespeare, Milton, undisturbed, a poor man dancing past the robber band, you knew you had been faithful to a gift the Holy Ghost as muse bestowed at birth, plowing by mind and hand down lines and rows, true to the ancient sanctions of the land. And though in your own way you'd come to drink like Socrates, the poison of the age, Narcissus leaning breathless to the pool, Sherlock aroused for Moriarty's kiss, you wrote late poems and essays to be whole, returning to that place where you were born, full harvests of a blood moon in the fields as you stayed up all night, suffering AIDS a decade while completing those 2 books, your story left for others who would strive for mind's integrity, which years ago a break-in had confirmed, exemplified, as did your final moment's final breath, when from your deathbed, halfway rising up, with blinded eyes, you looked beyond and said, Plato? To one now sent to take you home, to that last great symposium of love, at which the conversation never ends. That's how he died. Plato? Some figure from the other world came and took him away. Do I have time to read the last 2, one for Leo and one for Stella? Okay. You know, Points of Gold, this beautiful collection of poems by various poets that Stella Nisanovich put together. I believe, I remember correctly, correct me if I don't, that Stella got a copy, or at least the proof sheets of this book, to Leo just before he died. The poem I have for him is very short. It's called Before and After Reading. The last time I saw him was in February, like this month of 2003. we were in New Orleans at a conference by some organization, I can't remember its name, but it was for people who wrote about literature from a Christian perspective. Leo was deeply Christian. It was at the St. Charles Hotel, and before we read, we got to sit and talk for a while. Leo read a poem for John Finley too. He also read a poem for a priest friend of his who had been murdered in New Orleans. And as the priest was dying, in the act of being murdered, he forgave people who were killed. And Leo wrote about that, and that's mentioned here. And you'll notice bells have something to do with this poem. Bells have tongues, poets have tongues. Poems make sounds, bells make pealing sounds. He also told me something, I don't know if this has ever been recorded or not. He didn't tell me who it was, and I'm glad he didn't because I don't have to lie. But he had sent poems to the editor of some journal, and he said the editor had written him back and said, if I get a poem submitted that has the word God, Christ, or Mary in it, it goes right in the trash. I don't even read it. Now, you don't have to write Christian poetry. You can write poetry from any perspective, but that seems a little intolerant. Leo was outraged by that. So this is a short poem in couplets for Leo, and then I'll close with one for Stella, who isn't with us tonight, but I think she's listening in through live stream or through a recording being made. Before and after reading for Leo. We sat there as an early evening fell that winter on the old St. Charles Hotel, sipping dark coffee, polishing a line, community and grounds and sounds ground fine, for rarest listeners, those local rolls of Christian scholars, critics, poets, souls. It wasn't always thus. We knew the tale of readings where smart smirks and sighs assail verses fleshed with image that bear the word, capital W. Staves staving off the utterly absurd, shunned by some smug editors unannoyed by changes tolling into a tongueless void. But not tonight. And so we took our place behind the podium pulpit, sacred space for poet rectors, humble yet ordained to lift up all they hoped their work sustained. And when you read your elegy for John, our brother maker, lost to AIDS, then what about your priest friend, near here beaten dead, by those young men he prayed for as he bled? Your smile and twinkling teardrop eyes would shine as ever in this comedy divine, where souls untold will hear your poem bells pealing, say Christ made even death itself a healing. So God bless Leo and his memory. All right, do I have time to read the one for Stella? I was going to read some excerpts from critical statements on their fine poetry, but in the interest of time, I won't do that. I want to close with a poem from another book of mine. There it is, called Beyond the Chandeleurs, the Chandeleur Islands, off the mouth of the Mississippi. They were discovered on February 2, 1699 by Iberville, if I'm saying that right. And of course, Candlemas is the day that we remember the presentation of Christ in the temple after 40 days after his birth. Mary and Joseph take him there. The old man Simeon, whom God has promised, you will not see death until the Savior is shown to you. He sees the Christ child, knows this is the one, so now he can die. I try to weave together in this poem a lot of different strands. Saint Bernard is the name of an old delta of the Mississippi. The actual Saint Bernard founded Clairvaux Abbey, which was devoted to the Virgin Mary, and they celebrated Candlemas there by lighting candles. And at the end of the poem, as we look up into the night sky, beyond the Chandeleurs, the stars look like candles or torches as if the whole universe is a kind of temple. And we're all in the position of Simeon, knowing that everything in our life has been ordered for the good. So I won't go any further than that. But one of the great qualities of Stella's poetry is she weaves together strands of many things, like weaving a tapestry, very beautifully done. And I'm trying to do the same thing in this poem, so I thought this would be a way of honoring her and wishing her well. And I'll close with this one. Beyond the Chandeleurs, Island reached a name by Iberville on February 2, Candlemas Day, 1699. Old channels of the river's sunken bed, gone under shores, black waters wash and tar, 10,000 years have swung from side to side for more than 50 miles through swamp and marsh. And underneath the waves of Breton Sound, a buried delta settles on the shelf, worn down by storms and tides 9 centuries, here where the Mississippi found the Gulf, while St. Bernard, for whom the place is named, inside remote Clairvaux, as tapers blaze, praised Mary as the mother of the child, whose mortal flesh was hers, and hers his grace. And now, 300 years from Iberville, this frigid winter dawn, the very day whose name he gave those shores toward which we sail, we cross the Sound to find the Chandeleurs, so luminous in moonlight, crescent dunes, bleak beaches without islands, miles from land, forever washed by waves that crash across their narrow breadth, channeling in the sand. And as we pass by slowly south-southwest, we see in mingled gleams of moon and sun, bubbling over the salt and wind-blown foam, the play of shape and chaos, our true home. So too in that grim interim, the break, rent Christendom in 1699, Iberville sailed on, blind through sleet and fog, threading the low marsh islands, mud drift logs, and those hooked spits of swirling sea and earth, moving through uncreation where his men would dig deep pits to make fresh water wells and sleep on planks above the flooding strand. Yet when at last he reached the Chandeleurs, whose myrtles yielded wax for Candlemas, he tasted in the wind-borne glazing rain sweet water from the Mississippi's mouth. And though we find no myrtles on these shores, we still can glimpse within each twinkling grain so near black dregs of marshes and the rigs, glimmering hints old Simeon discerned in eyes that glowed with heaven's native light, just as the stars, like whirling hurricanes, come from the vast galactic nursing grounds, candles that burn in scattered grains of flame, now blaze the blatant purpose of the world, beyond the Chandeleurs that still remain within this star-torched temple love preserves, declaring till the end their given name. Thank you very much. Is the guy who's balding on the back row just to Stella's, well, from our perspective, to the left, behind the woman in the white blouse. I'm the guy way at the back, the tall guy's always in the back, the awful suit and the awful tie. Huey and Debbie Gugliardo, who taught at LSU Eunice, you may have known her here. Lyndon Stahl is a good friend of Stella Leo's and mine, and John Finley still lives in Baton Rouge, fine poet. And who's that young lady? There she is, my old friend. I'm glad you reminded me about that one. Thank you so much. I think I'm available for questions, is that correct? Or we can do that while we enjoy the goodies, or whatever you all want me to do.
Shall we just adjourn and then, David, thank you very much.
Okay.